You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 5.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Do you know someone or know of someone who walks the walk and would like to hear them on the Born to Kick Arse podcast? They can be from any field, but they need to have an inspiring story that will help to motivate others to achieve their own goals. If you do, please head over to borntokickarse.com/suggest a guest and fill out the form. We'd love to hear from you. Ben Duffus is one of Australia's best ultra trail runners and loves mountains. The steeper the better. Ben has a slew of victories under his belt, including wins at Sky Rock and Run Marathon, Kawerau King of the Mountain, the 68k Hounslow Classic, the River to Rooftop Skyscraper Climb, 1,040 stairs, the Coastal High 50, Pomona King of the Mountain, Shotover Moonlight Mountain Marathon, and the 100-kilometre Surf Coast Century. In 2014, Ben also podiumed, coming in at third place, and was first junior in the Skyrunning World Championships, an 80k race at Mont Blanc against the best in the world. To top it all off, Ben is also currently studying for his PhD in theoretical physics at the University of Queensland. Ben is an absolute speed demon and a true inspiration. Enjoy the interview. Ben Duffus, thanks for your time today and welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
G'day, good to be here.
I've looked through your website, benduffus.com, and you've got an incredible resume.
Thank you.
Before we explore your adventures and try to extract as much wisdom as we can from you, can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you're from, what were your interests growing up, and how you discovered ultra running?
So I'm Brisbane born and bred. I've lived my whole life here in Brisbane, in the western suburbs, really. So as a kid, I played all sort of classic sort of Australian sports that I was playing footy, I was playing cricket, dabble in tennis. I did a lot of swimming, actually, was my first major sport where I was doing sort of daily training. And that actually set me up fairly well fitness-wise. I think it was a good way to develop all-round sort of fitness and get in the habit also of a sort of daily training regime that I think the fact that I was doing 6 a.m. swim squad as a kid, it sort of shows nowadays when I'm still someone who gets up and does their training first thing in the morning before breakfast and that, because that's what I was doing as a kid. But I'd given that away by the time I was sort of 12, 13 and sort of by then was just focusing on team sports. And it wasn't until I was really 14 that I decided I wanted to get fitter for those sports and started going on daily jogs just with my dad. And it was probably only 2 or 3 Ks that we'd do every day. But back then we thought that was a long way and we're really impressed with ourselves. And yeah, that sort of had me doing okay at sort of school cross country. That was about it. Sort of then I had my first athletics coach when I was 15, and that was sort of when I really started to take to running. They sort of really helped learn a lot of important lessons from them about just, I guess, how to train and also the mentality of it. That they sort of really helped teach me that I don't think I ever had the natural athleticism of some kids. Some kids could just sort of rock up without training and beat me. I certainly never had any sort of sprint finish, but that coach really instilled in me that if you want to be the best, you just have to work the hardest. And so by the time I was 16, I was state cross-country champion. But then all the sort of classic growing injury sort of kicked in, and the rest of my sort of teen years were spent on and off with injury. But then when I was 18, I made my first Australian team for the World Mountain Running Championships, and was lucky enough to head over to Slovenia for that, and that was where I sort of really fell in love with the mountains, as I say. That was what really inspired me to get into ultra running later. That I thought, wow, this is amazing. I want to go further. I want to explore more. Just running up once isn't enough. I want to run up this peak and then down and then up that one and then down that one and then up that one. And so, yeah, that was sort of what inspired me to, once I was out of the junior ranks, to step up to ultra running fairly quickly.
And what about the allure of the track? The flat track, just running around a 400-meter track, did that sort of get you interested at all, or was it? So
that was certainly where I started. I started athletics and that, doing your 1500s and 800s and that. Like I said, I was always getting out kicked, so I had to just try and front run and win that way. But I always much preferred cross country and training. It would go and run on Mount Cootha sometimes because I lived right near it, and I much more enjoyed that than running laps around a track. That I'd rather just do one big out and back or one big loop than repetitive laps. And just the idea of trying to do something to push into some new realm rather than just do the same thing 3 seconds quicker. Like, it's still an admirable goal. I'm not trying to talk down those sort of races. It just doesn't inspire me as much as standing on the start line of something where I'm wondering, can I actually finish this?
One of the main things looking through your resume is there's a common theme, and the thing that screams out as me is mountain. How much of your training is geared towards climbing and descending? Would you say sort of most of your training is based on that sort of approach, like a lot of climbing and a lot of descending?
Typically when I'm training for mountain events, every single run is on Mount Cootha, or when I'm in the really serious phase, I'll head out to, say, Mount Warning or Mount Barning nearby. I mean, that's a long day because it's a 90-minute to 2-hour drive just to get there and then the same back. So that becomes a whole day thing on the weekends. But yeah, basically every training session will be going up and down. And even actually, I only run usually 5 days a week, and 2 days a week I'll cross train where I'll be in the gym and also on the bike. But even on the bike, I go to Mount Cootha. I find it actually mentally easier being going up and down than on the flat, just because I find it naturally breaks it up. It's much easier to just focus on, well, say Mount Cootha, it might take me 10, 15 minutes to get up a climb. And so that automatically breaks up. I'm not thinking about 2 hours. I'm thinking about that 10, 15 minutes. And that's easier for me than if it was a flat run where I don't have those natural milestones and have to try and do that artificially.
So how do you approach, like when you're starting a race, do you have a particular approach when it comes to the climbs? Do you have in your mind you're going to walk or hike the ups and run the flats and the downs, or do you just run the ups?
It becomes a matter, well, it depends largely on how long is this race. If it's one of my favourite races, Pomona King of the Mountain, is 4.5K just up on the Sunshine Coast. But other races, it's 100K, and so obviously that makes a big difference of whether you're running or walking. But a lot of it, that's something you learn in training. I think one of the reasons you go and do your 4 or 5 hour training runs is that you learn what is a sustainable gradient to be hiking or versus running. And so so you've got to learn to do it by feel. And so I'm always thinking, even on the first climb, would I be hiking this if it was the final climb, and try and base my judgments accordingly. And from there, it's always just a matter of looking at, okay, what's this gradient like in front of me, and also how technical is it, and making a decision based off that, right? And we might pick a tree and go, okay, I can see that I should be hiking up to that tree, but then after that, I'm definitely running because I can see it gets less steep or something like that. I'm just constantly picking landmarks which I'll be walking or running to.
I remember one time I did the Kokoda Challenge years ago.
Oh, yep, done that a couple of times.
I think the first main climb from Polly's, I remember having a big, I think I had like a sandwich or something quite big at the bottom of the mountain, and I didn't realise, because that was the first time I'd done that run, and I didn't realise that it was such a long climb, and having to digest a big bit of food from the bottom of the climb, that was a bit of a mistake.
Yeah, my first experience at Polly's was also in the Kokoda Challenge. That must have been back in 2012, yeah, but done it quite a few times since then in training, so yeah, know that climb well. Yeah, wouldn't want to be digesting a big meal going up that.
Yeah, that's it. So the Pomona King of the Mountain, I know you've run that one a couple times or a number of times. What's your history with that? And yeah, can you give us some further insight into that particular run?
So for those who don't know it, it's, as I said, 4.5K race up a 450-metre mountain over in the Sunshine Coast hinterland. Like quite a few classic races, it starts off, its origins were just a couple of people in a pub waging a bet of who could run up and down the mountain fastest. And now it's turned into an annual event. And so you just start in the centre of town, run to the base of the mountain. But then the actual climb itself is probably one of the most, if not, well, no, it'd be the most technical climb and descent I've seen in any Australian race. I'm not saying there aren't more technical ones out there, but I haven't, none that I've done. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun. That it's all over in, well, a major goal is for people to do it in under half an hour. So it's over relatively quickly, but you're scrambling on rocks. When I've done it, I'm hiking most of this major climb. You sort of run to the base of the climb. From there, it's all hiking, but then the descent is just jumping off rocks and that. And and you're coming down pretty much for the most part the same route that you came up, but people are always very good at getting out of your way as they're coming up and you're coming down, and you're getting all these sort of cheers and support. And then once you have the final couple of 100 meters, it's lined with people all cheering. So she's got an amazing atmosphere. Before the race, literally every single competitor gets called out and does a sort of almost victory lap before you've even run it in front of cheering crowds and that. So it's just an amazing event with a great atmosphere.
And you've won that a couple times?
Yeah, I've won that a couple of times. And last year I also won the sister race, the Carrow King of the Mountain, which is over in New Zealand, North Island, which is a similar sort of event in that you start in the middle of town, run up the mountain next to town and come back. But it's a little bit longer. It's an 8K race up a 800 and something metre mountain. But yeah, that one's also a lot of fun. Very different. Whereas Pomona's rocky, this one's all loose dirt, and so you're practically skiing back down.
So can you please share with us some of your highlights and the main achievements that you're most proud of?
So I guess my most proud achievement would, I guess, becoming third at the Skyrunning World Championships in 2014. Obviously, World Champs are coming up again this year in July, and ideally I'd like to finish a couple of places higher, but that's something working towards. Finishing the top 10 a couple of times at the North Face 100, which was kind of that, now Ultra Trail Australia, but that race holds a real significance for me because that was my first DNF in an ultra, I had done one ultra before that, but I always see that race as sort of my baptism of fire. That was when I sort of realised what I got myself into.
And can you just share what you went through and that run, the North Face?
So that was in 2012 when I did it the first time. I'd done the Wild Horse Criterium, which is 60K, a couple of months before that, which was my first ever ultra. And that one, 60K, fairly flat, and you're also starting in the dark, and so that kind of helps you hold yourself back a bit and pace yourself well. And so I was struggling for the last 20K in that first ultra, but it was 19 and thought I was bulletproof, and I'd done one ultra, so I thought, yeah, why not? I'll do North Face, because I had my friend Kane Warburton had pulled out and had an entry, which he was happy to give me cheaply. So I thought, yep, you beauty, this is great. And so get to the start. I didn't really know. I literally had no nutrition plan. I just had a few different products which people had recommended and some water in my pack and thought, yep, this will do. And I went out quite conservatively for the first 2 kilometers, then thought this feels too easy and sped up. And by 10K in, I was running alongside Jez Bragg and like, hang on, I recognize you, I know you. And that probably should have been signaling alarm bells that I was going way too hard, that I hadn't trained well enough. But at that stage, I was feeling good, and I'd pulled off my first ultra experience. I thought things were going well. And we sort of ran together for another 10, 15 Ks. Then just coming off Narrow Neck, before checkpoint 2, some vandals on bikes who go on and moved course markings. Normally there are, for those who haven't done Ultra Trail Australia, North Face 100, there are markings pretty much every 100, 200 metres. So it's a very well-marked course, and we sort of had realised after sort of getting along and sort of, we haven't seen a course marking in 5Ks. We should have looking at GPS watches and going, we should be at the checkpoint by now, what's going on? And someone else was up ahead of us and they'd turned back and told us, no, look, we're definitely going the wrong way. We should be at the checkpoint by now. So we had to turn around. And I think it was at that point that I just suddenly, Jez just took off. He was fairly annoyed at having come halfway around the world to go off course on a well-marked course. And at this point, that was when I started going a bit downhill. But still at about 25K at that point until I was going to see crew. And so I was running less and less, and by the time I was telling myself, all right, I'm just going to pull out at 50K, like I'm done. I've realized I've gone out too hard. I've learnt my lesson. I'm done. And anyway, I get to the checkpoint. I'm walking mostly at this point, and Kane's there at the checkpoint. And apparently him and Zach had conspired, because I'd seen one of my friends, Dave, had run past me, had a quick chat, and asked me how I was feeling, and I told him I was going to pull out. So Dave had told my crew this, and they had conspired not to let me pull out. So as soon as I got in, they were all positive, yep, putting bottles into my pack and that, just pushing me out basically. And I thought, oh, good, I can do this. Yep, feeling so much perked up from that. But that only lasted a couple of Ks before it was back to walking. And yeah, by the time I was 75K, and this was back when you went down Kadumba. Now your race go up a bit. This was other direction back then. By then I was doing about 45-minute Ks downhill. I was dehydrated. I was completely bonked. I was completely out of it. I actually still had water inside my bottles, but I was so out of it. Like, I could see the water. I knew it was there. I knew I was thirsty, and just like couldn't put 2 and 2 together to actually drink it. My friend Delina found me at this point, and fortunately she's a nurse, so she kind of knew what to do, get some sugar in me, get some water in me, and she sacrificed her race to then call the support staff to then come pick us up. So we were then getting all our gear out of the pack, all the thermals and the space blanket and everything, and huddled there on the side of the road as it's going dark and getting cold, and people are coming by with their headlamps, and everyone was really concerned for us. Everyone was offering help and food and that, and so it was a great atmosphere. But yeah, I remember in the truck as we were going to the final checkpoint to pull out properly, promising her I would come back the next year and complete it, which I was very glad that I did. Came 7th that next year, and that was sort of my real. But that was then, yeah, my first solo 100K, as I'd done the Kokoda Challenge with a group of friends in July 2012, which was my first 100K 96, but almost 100K that I'd run. That was a team one. But yeah, North Face then in 2013, yeah, it was then my first solo 100K that I finished.
So with that DNF, did you beat yourself up much afterwards? And what sort of steps did you take to overcome the DNF mentally?
Everything. That was my focus for the next year. Basically, was North Face 100. That was as far as I was concerned with running. Like that was my goal for that next 12 months was the North Face 100, and that was when I really got serious about ultra running. I think that was when I started working with my coach, Andy Dubois. I feel like that was probably the number one thing in helping me physically. That was when I started trialing all sorts of. Fortunately, I was living with my parents back then, so I could live fairly cheaply because I think all the income I was getting, I was spending on gear and shoes and that and nutrition just to try everything and figure out what worked for me. That was when I started running in Hoka shoes. I found, that made a difference. A few friends had put me onto that. I'd tried all the different minimalist ones and settled on that. Tried all the different nutrition products and everything and different gear, what feels good. And but also I think working with Andy was physically the best thing, the most helpful thing, but also the mental side that I sort of really didn't know, had no concept of sort of the different mentality of how to run 100K versus my background of having run 10K races. And of course it's very different. But also then I think training, having done the proper I think for me doing long runs and then training are as much about the psychological training as it is the physical training. That it teaches you how to go into that zone where you're just fatigued, your legs you don't really want to keep going, but it's about mind over matter at that point, where sometimes have some sort of little mantra like you don't need legs, it's all in your head, that sort of thing. And sort of reminding yourself that most of the limitations really, if you're getting nutrition right, you've done the training, from there it pretty much is about your the psychology of keeping a positive attitude, being prepared also mentally for the race, going over, having seen the North Face course before meant that for the next year, I was visualizing it constantly in my head, basically every run. And so you kind of felt like you knew it really well. And they're learning to sort of stay in the moment, not psych myself out without the fact that I might be tired and I've got 50K to go, just how to focus on, okay, let's get up this next climb. Okay, let's get along this flat bit. Okay, let's get down this hill and just stay in the moment and enjoy it. But also just hearing from the more experienced people on that, just the fact that, yes, at 60, 70K into a 100K ultra, everyone's hurting, that's normal. And the reminder that if it wasn't hard, you'd probably just be signing up for something harder.
Now, in the 2014 North Face 100, you did an incredible time, a sub 10 hour, 9:56. That's an incredible time. Were you aiming for a sub 10, or did you sort of have a particular? Was the first aim to redeem yourself from 2013 to actually finish, or did you have a particular time?
2013 was my first finish. 2014 was, I was actually still looking to redeem myself from a DNF. At 2014, I'd had a bit of a niggle in my Achilles at the start of the year, so I'd kind of had most of the start of the year off. I'd run the Shot Over Moonlight Mountain Marathon in February. So I was doing that off. Yes, but I was doing that off not a lot of running training. That was mostly off hiking training. And so I'd had a disrupted lead into the Buffalo Stampede to say the least. But I took off like I was in the best form of my life, leading Dakota Jones and that for a good 20K or something before he then caught up with me and then took off up Buffalo, and I tried to chase him but couldn't keep up, and then Blake and I were chasing him back down Buffalo, and eventually by the time we hit the bottom of Buffalo, I was gone. I could see Blake was fatiguing a bit. Wasn't moving quite as well before, but I was just walking up Keating's Ridge at that point, and along the valley, Buckland Valley. I was, even though it's a flat road, I was still just staggering. Really, that stagger turned into a trip, and by then I was too fatigued to get up, so I started crawling, and then my arms gave out eventually as well, and that was the end of that race. So that was in April of 2014. So come May, the North Face 100, that was all for me about holding back, trusting that if I held back, I would reap the dividends for it later in the race. And so I purposefully went out making sure it felt too easy. It's really hard to go out too easy in an ultra. And really looking at the times, it wasn't too easy. It just felt too easy because you're obviously arriving fit. And I even had people commenting to me in that race, in that first 20K, oh, shouldn't you be a bit further up ahead? You were top 10 last year. Why are you all the way back here? And I was looking at my watch and thinking, well, we're actually still on sub 10 pace. So, we're not really holding back. It just feels easy. And my goal was really to hit that last checkpoint, 80K, feeling good. And I did that. I was feeling great at 80K. I thought, you beaut. But that was all I'd prepared for mentally, funnily enough. In my head, I was going to hit 80K feeling good, and that was it. I'd forgot to prepare myself for that last 20K, which is a 1,000-meter descent and then a 1,000-meter climb, basically. So feeling good, I could do a 1,000-meter descent, and that went okay. Then at the bottom, things just fell apart for me. I was just walking everything, and I lost one. I was fourth, and then Jono passed me, and I was back in fifth on that climb. And then it was with about 4K to go. Stefan came up behind me, and something just clicked in my mind, and I said, no, I'm not giving up this position. And I think looking at the times, I can't remember if this is correct, but I think I was one of, if not had the quickest final 5K split. And I remember going up those 1,000 stairs in the last kilometer, and I was just giving it everything and flying, and put a few minutes into Stefan, like 5K. And there was no physical reason for that. Looking back, that really showed me how mental it was, because it was like a switch flicked as soon as he came. I went from walking and just wanting to sit down on the side to suddenly running what was probably a quick 5K for me, even if I was fresh. And with absolutely no physical reason. Maybe I'd rested up a bit by walking most of that climb. That really taught me another important lesson of you've got to prepare mentally for that whole race, and just how much fatigue is a mental state rather than a physical one. That, if a lion suddenly started chasing you, if after you'd run 100K, you could probably find the ability to run a couple more. There's always that bit more inside of you, and you just got to find ways to tap into it. So that meant at the Skyrunning World Champs later that year, which was then another 6 weeks later, I was really trying to apply that lesson of, I was really focused on that final climb, and descent was my real mental goal. I made sure I'd seen that. Well, funnily enough, I made sure I had seen that final descent so I could prepare for it well. But unfortunately, a week before the race, while I was seeing it for the first time, I rolled my ankle quite badly at the top of that climb, which was pretty much the same spot where then a week later in the championships where I took third spot. And that same spot, I then knew I had to just give that final descent everything, despite having a few poor experiences with that particular spot. But that kind of made up for it.
And how much did your choice of shorts play a part in that? And can you elaborate? I know there's a bit of a story around your clothing attire for that year.
In 2014, in the North Face 100, my parents were also there. They were crewing for me, and Dad was running in the Ultra. And so they had gone down a week before to make a holiday out of it. I thought, okay, well, I'll save myself a bit of money. I'll just bring carry-on on my flight, and I'll send all my gear down with them the week beforehand because they were driving. So they'd have a car for the week holiday. Yep, this is great. And unfortunately, one of the bags got left behind, and that was the particular bag that had my clothes for race day. Now, luckily, it was, well, by chance, I'd had Compressed Sport had given me some new gear that week while after the stuff had been sent down. So I brought that with me. So I had a top, but I didn't have any shorts, as I only discovered after the race briefing at 8 o'clock or something at night. But then all the clothes stores were shut. And so we sort of, what could possibly open? Well, we raced back to the where the race briefing was, because there had been the North Face stall had been selling gear. They were just packing up. I thought, do you have any shorts? And I'm like, yes, we've got a couple, but they'd sold out of men's in my size. So I had my choice of, do I want the bright green yellow women's pair or the black and white pair? And I decided I'd go with the more laid back black and white pair, just because it went a bit better with my top, of course. And so raced in those, raced 100k in those the following day, doing what you're told not to do of trying new gear on the day. And obviously they were a little tighter in some places than most other shorts, but with enough body glide, I got through without any chafing.
Oh, that's a funny story. I know you're also studying at uni. You're doing a PhD.
Yep. I'm doing my PhD in theoretical quantum physics at the University of Queensland, essentially looking at sort of material sciences on the microscopic scale, trying to find ways to flag materials for new technologies.
And when are you aiming to have that completed?
Well, I'm about 7 months in now, so hopefully in about 3 years or so, would be looking at completion. But yeah, it's a while off.
I wanted to sort of touch on time management. The uni schedule, that's going to take up a lot of your time, researching, learning, studying, spending a lot of time with that part of your life, and also juggling your training and your races throughout the year. How do you best manage your time, and how do you go about prioritising your day?
So I feel like actually PhD makes things easier for juggling time than it was in undergrad, because in Australia in our PhD we don't have any coursework. So the hours I work are completely flexible. Other than the couple of meetings or tutoring hours I have, I don't have many set hours where I have to be in the office. Obviously, I still need to work 40 hours a week, but I can choose when those 40 hours are, which makes life a lot easier. Having said that, I'm still up usually at 5 a.m. to train. I like to do my training first thing in the morning, and I usually only train once a day. And just partly because it's Brisbane, so it's hot, so I sort of have to do it either early morning or late afternoon. And I like to do it when I'm sort of fresh, and that way I can do training, have breakfast, and then get on with the day and head into uni and then work then. And then on the weekends, that's sort of when you can fit in long runs, and particularly when in major training for something that can really take up a whole day. I mean, there have been for 100k races, I've had days where I've literally woken up, driven 2 hours to Mount Warning, done a 7-hour run, driven 2 hours back, and so that's 11 hours of just driving and running alone. Those can be pretty full-on days. So it doesn't leave a lot of time for much else, but you still manage to find time every now and again to go out on that and socialise and that. But fortunately, again, being actually at uni is kind of good for that you can sort of in your lunch breaks meet up with people and that.
Have you given much thought to 10 years from now? Do you want to use your PhD in a job, like a scientific role or like a research role or something like that? Or do you see yourself being a professional athlete and heading down that path in life?
Well, I try not to actually nowadays bother thinking 10 years down the track too much, because I think if I asked myself 5 years ago where I'd be, I would definitely not answer where I am now. So I know that there's a good chance where I think I'll be in 5 years' time probably won't be where I am in 5 years' time. So yeah, what exactly I'll be doing, I'm not sure. In terms of, look, if we saw a large influx of money into trail running and being a professional trail runner in Australia was actually a feasible option, that would be, I guess, the dream, really. Or alternately being involved in running some other form, be that coaching or sort of product design, and that have a real interest in. So that would be another alternative, how to sort of be in more using running as a professional outlet. And yeah, otherwise, PhD in physics could end up using that in a variety of different things, be that staying in academia or teaching or going to some other analytical sort of job.
I want to touch on motivation. So I'm just going to set the scene here. So just imagine it's winter, it's cold, it's dark, it's wet.
Well, I live in Brisbane, so you haven't described winter. Winter is, good, it's not boiling. I think it's more summer is the hard month over here. Summer's when it's like, oh no, it's like 35 degrees and 90% humidity and I'm on the verge of heat stroke. Winter's the easy months for training.
So let's set the scene for summer, like it's full on hardcore humidity and you're all sore and you're beat up from the previous day's training. What motivates you to get up and train?
Well, I mean, it all comes back to the end of the day, why are you doing it? And doing it because you love it. Like, it is, I think, a privilege to be able to go out in the mountains and that and be fit enough to be able to go and explore these amazing areas. That's sort of the ultimate motivation. Obviously, there are sessions where, okay, you're just doing reps up and down the same hill you've done 1,000 times before. So there isn't that sense of exploration. There still might be a sense of downhill reps can be really fun, but it's as much not about there being motivated as being just committed permanently that this is kind of the lifestyle that you enjoy and wanting to better yourself and just wanting to just pushing yourself into that sort of fatigue zone. Like, it's very satisfying when you know that you weren't feeling great, that in that sort of situation, you'll play different little tricks on myself. I always have sort of the 1 rep rule, which is if I've got a hard session or something and I don't feel like doing it, just do 1 rep. That's it. Just 1 rep. And if you feel terrible, like you feel worse after it, you're allowed to pull out. That's okay. But usually you'll find you feel better after that once you've gotten going and you've got the endorphins flowing, you've got the heart pumping and that actually you feel better and you sort of start to get into that zone that, yeah, often that first sort of couple of steps is the hardest, and then once you get going, it starts to feel good again. But yeah, sometimes in summer, particularly in summer, that can be when some sessions do get cut short. I've had a few over the summer where, particularly long runs, I've just literally overheated and just had to sit down on the side of the trail because I can't walk anymore. That happens. And I think it's about being able to accept that and not let that beat you down so that you can come in with a fresh mind the next day and go, okay, let's go at this. And yeah.
I just want to set another scene. So let's just say you're 2/3 of the way through a particular race, like 100K. Let's just say you're 70 Ks into 100K, and you're really suffering. You know, you're dehydrated, you got stomach issues, you're not absorbing food properly, and you're really suffering. Where do you draw your inspiration from in those moments?
So usually by the time you get to something like a race, you've really mentally prepared for it, I find that, need to be ready to be in that sort of situation. And I've played that kind of situation out in my mind a few times beforehand, that I think it's a mistake some people get into when they visualize races is that they, rather than visualize well, when I say they, I mean I've been guilty of this, of rather than it being a visualization, being a fantasization where everything goes perfectly. That's not going to happen. Like, it might, and great, but 99% of the time there's going to be rough patches. So I think I try to, in training and that, think of those situations and that, and so that I've been there before, and I think that kind of makes it easier. And then when you are hurting the race, telling yourself, well, this is what you signed up for. If I finished every ultra feeling fantastic, I'd just find myself a harder ultra and keep going indefinitely until that happens. So remind yourself, like, this is what you signed up for. This is what you wanted. Make the most of it. Think about how satisfying it will be to finish. I think sometimes some of the most satisfying races are those where they're not necessarily your best race. Things went wrong, but you push through them anyway. So trying to keep that sort of short-term pain for long-term gain mentality. I mean, if things are going horribly wrong and you do have to walk or something, also just try to not let it get me down. Like, I'm obviously guilty of that also, of sometimes going into a bit of a low mental patch there if things are going poorly, of thinking, oh, woe is me, everything's terrible. But in that case, I think try and shift the focus. If it does get to the situation where I need to walk or something like that, rather than try and dwell then on myself, I'll try to dwell on the scenery, the fact that, okay, I'm moving slower now. I can appreciate the view a bit better, try and turn the negative into a positive and just enjoy what I can do in that moment, and sort of check back in myself. Am I feeling a bit better now? No, I still want to die. Okay, I'll keep walking. And then, and try and get through it that way. So trying to, see the bright side, I guess, and, just remind yourself this is what I signed up for.
And what's running taught you about patience?
A lot. It's funny, actually, with... I'm always drawing analogies actually between ultras and doing my PhD, that it's very much about trying to focus on what you're doing now rather than looking at that final goal, that final goal is always intimidating, and that the way to run 100 Ks is one step at a time. The way to sort of do your PhD is one sum at a time. Mine's fairly mathematical. And so I think that I can still actually be quite an impatient person. I get it from my mother. Sorry, Mum, you're probably listening to this. And so, I think that I've definitely become a lot more patient over the years through running ultras and that, but I still often need to try and like consciously bring that sort of mentality over into new situations. So that's something I'm still learning and getting better at, that I kind of, I find it easier to apply those sort of lessons in sort of the running context, but it is definitely applicable to sort of all wakes of life.
Do you think you need to be mentally tough to run ultramarathons?
Yes, but I think that it's kind of running ultramarathons will also make you mentally tougher sort of thing. That you obviously need a certain element of mental toughness to ever commit to going, or just plain stupidity or something, to commit to going, right, I am going to do this, and really actually commit to building it. And I think in the training and all that, you build your mental toughness and that, and your ability to handle pain and that. And then, it grows and grows and grows. That some people, yes, are just innately born with this extreme mental toughness, but I think for most of us, it's something that we develop over time.
There's a state known as the flow state, or runner's high, or being in the zone. It's a state that is beyond thought. It's beyond time. It's when you're completely immersed in the present moment. And, you're at your most creative and you're completely free.
I love that
can you
feeling.
describe what you're feeling when you're in that state, and just give us some insight into that?
So I remember, I can think of 2 races where I felt that. Only 2. The first one was when I was 16. I'd only been running seriously for probably about 6 months or something. That was when I won my first state cross-country championship. And that was kind of really the moment that I decided I was inverted commas runner. That was when I decided that was something that I really wanted to focus on, and that was my thing as such. And yeah, because I remember just it feeling easy the whole way, even though I was performing much, 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 much better than I ever had before. And that was about it. And just the whole time, I never had a negative thought during that. It was the whole time just thinking, wow, this feels great, sort of thing. And then the other time was, Chamonix 2014, the Skyrunning World Championships, that really more the second half. That was sort of when I felt like I really entered that first half had been taking it fairly easy and just catching up spots the whole way as kind of the reward for holding back at that start. And it wasn't until I got into about halfway and had some friends tell me I was in the top 10 that I sort of was, oh, I'm running well. This wasn't what I expected. And from there, then just focusing on catching the people in front of me, but it just feeling easy, even though I was performing far beyond any other performance I'd done before. And yeah, so I wish there was like much I could describe, but honestly, like that's your mind is fairly blank because you're just so immersed in the moment, and time passes really quickly and easily in a sense. They're just kind of like, oh, I've been running for 11 hours. I feel good, sort of thing. And so, yeah, in one sense, I wish every run could be like that. In another sense, I don't, that it makes you really appreciate those times that it arrives, that the runs where it's hard makes those moments more enjoyable. And I think that if everyone was like that, that would become the new baseline, and you'd want something more.
Now on goal setting, how important is goal setting, whether it's in running or in life?
So yeah, I'm quite a goal-orientated person. I would say that I always need a goal to be a major race or something to be focusing on, or some major outlet. That if I'm just sort of ambling along without a clear direction, I find that really disconcerting. And so I think all the classic sort of goal-setting rules of being specific and having goals which are certainly achievable, but I think also having some really intimidating goals also, that I think if a goal doesn't kind of scare you and you don't question your ability to achieve it, then it's not hard enough. That certainly have many of my ambitions sort of are ones where I go like, I'm not sure if I will be able to make it, but I'm going to give it everything to try and get there.
Would you say the World Mountain Running Championships in, when was it, in 2014? The Sky Running World Champs.
Yep.
Was that your proudest moment so far?
Yeah, definitely. That I guess when I'd set out and running, I never thought I'd win a world championship medal, and so the fact that I did that and was age group.
Can you maybe give us some insight into the last 2Ks of that run? Did you know you had third place in the bag, and sort of what was it like, in the couple Ks leading up to the finish line with the crowd and the atmosphere and knowing, and the scenery and the scene? Can you maybe talk us through that?
Well, I only hit third place with about 5K to go, and that was with about 1,000 meters of descent or something, like maybe 6K or something with not 800 meters of descent or something. Anyway, it was only about 5K from the finish line with a whole heap of descending to go that I hit that. And so I was just not looking back at all, just refusing to look back, and just because this was, as I said, the point where I'd rolled my ankle, and so I was just being extra cautious and just focusing on giving it absolutely everything. So actually that descent, I was just wanting the finish line to come, because I was still in third. And yeah, by the time I hit Chamonix, I knew the guy behind me was French. So I was listening to the crowd behind me. And by the time I was 200 meters into the crowd, so I'd been running past 200 meters of crowd, and I still hadn't heard any cheering behind me. That was the point at which I knew, right, okay, I've got this. I can stop. I don't have to do a sprint finish, fortunately. Yeah, and so at that point could really lap it up because the whole of Chamonix was lined sort of 3, 4 people deep, with just everyone going nuts. It was an amazing atmosphere. They really hype you up, just makes it a great experience. And yeah, knowing that I didn't have to sprint, so I could really start to enjoy it and high five the crowd and that, and really try and remember the moment as well.
That's super inspirational.
Yeah, like it's. I mean, I really want to go back one year and do UTMB just because I hear so that sort of all the checkpoints and that are a bit like that. But yeah, the finish line can be just like that, where it's that amazing atmosphere. And yeah, like it's a beautiful area, obviously. And I think UTMB is looks like a great race, even if it didn't have that atmosphere. But just yeah, that atmosphere is sort of something to go do. And other races like Zagama and that, which you hear have a similar sort of thing. I'd love to do them just for that. And it really helps you sort of hit that next. It's hard not to push yourself that bit harder when you've got 1,000 people screaming at you positively.
I just want to touch on your success secrets. Who's the first person that comes to mind when you hear the word successful, and why?
No one person comes to mind when you say successful. That I think there are lots of sort of different ways to be successful in life. There are the obvious glorified ways where you have sort of like Olympians and stuff like that in sport, or be it entrepreneurs and that you're making lots of money or something, but also just everyday people. When at ultras and that, I always like to go and watch the last hour of an ultra, just to watch those people at the back of the pack finishing, because I know that sometimes like I've done it in half the time they did it, so it's a whole new sort of realm. They must be so much more fatigued than I was, and they're still smiling and loving it, and I draw a lot of inspiration from watching that, and just sort of from the everyday things that I think sort of people like to try and give all these labels of success to sort of people at the front or earning lots of money or whatever, and whereas I think that success really is more just putting in hard work and then people hitting their goals and that. And so it sort of doesn't matter how that your goal compares to someone else's goal, because no two people are the same. Like, you've got all these different backgrounds and stuff that are going to accumulate. I obviously is very lucky that I have had great coaches and supportive parents and that, who have put me in a good situation in life. And so if people want to label that as successful, great. But if I see other people working just as hard, if not harder, and hitting their goals, they might not get as much credit, but I'll still find that really inspiring.
And what's long distance running taught you about yourself?
That I can keep going. That I think from a young age, I learned that was something that I was good at, that I wasn't naturally the best at anything. But I learned from, quite a young age, I could work harder than most other people, or at least just, keep applying myself. And that's something then try and draw upon, sort of in everyday life of, I mean, you can kind of put things in perspective of like, okay, this is hard now. How hard was it when you were 90K into the North Face 100 or something like that? Okay, well, this isn't quite that hard, is it? Okay, I can keep going. I've pushed through harder, sort of thing.
And when were you, what age were you when you first got into ultras?
I was 19 when I ran my first ultra.
I just got a couple questions on advice. If you could make a phone call to the 18-year-old Ben Duffus and give him a bit of advice, what would you tell him?
First off, you're not bulletproof, so take things slowly, train smartly, and build up a bit more slower with your running. Get a coach, and so you can do things smartly, because you might think you know everything, but you don't. Also, probably don't bother with that starting that engineering degree, because you're not going to finish it. Just do the straight science. Yep.
And what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, either in running or in life? Is there any bit of advice that you've received that sticks in your mind?
No one piece of advice really sticks. That I think it really is situationally dependent, that you have lots of different bits of advice to receive. But in general, like I said, one thing that I always try to do is if you want to be the best, you have to train the hardest, is one thing I always got told. And so that applies to sort of any sort of wake in life, that just a reminder that, like, it's never, if you want to have all these lofty goals that need to be prepared to work for it, that these goals without a plan is just a dream. And so you've got to really sort of plan for it and then just, work your butt off to get there.
What advice have you got for the listener out there who, like, they might be a teenager or sort of in their early 20s that also wants to get into ultra trail running? Would you have any advice for those just wanting to start out?
Yeah, so I'd say to any teenager wanting to start out is that get in contact with sort of people who know what they're doing, coaches, contact me or something. So if I talk to you, like that I think when I was a teenager, I thought, oh yeah, I can just, and as most teenagers do, thought, oh yeah, I can just do this. Like, of course I can, it'll be easy. And it's not. That you make a lot of mistakes and especially when you're growing, can get injured a lot. And so I think that, which I did. And so I wish I'd rather go back and talk to like 14-year-old me and tell him to calm down a little bit. That I think I got injured a lot as a 16, 17, 18-year-old because my ambitions exceeded my strength. And so I had a tendency to overtrain, as many runners do. And so I think it's important. So I think someone like me, for instance, working with a coach, and that is really important. So you've got someone to give you advice. It also rein you back. But if you've got those days where you're sort of like, oh, am I just being a wuss or am I actually tired? And that, to have someone sort of help you make those decisions, and that find that much easier. So I think it's about doing it smart. And so not doing it alone.
Now I've got a lightning round, so there's just a few quick fire questions for you.
Yep.
If you could recommend one book on any topic, what would that be?
I just finished actually a really good book, How Bad Do You Want It? It was called, on the psychobiological model for sort of sports psychology and that. And I found that really good because pretty much all the chapters I could sort of really, in some sense it was a lot of stuff that I'd read before, but it was all written really well, I thought, for sport, but also a lot of the lessons could be applied outside.
And what's the best purchase you've made in the last year for $50 or less?
Oh, for $50 or less. I don't make a lot of small purchases, so I'm trying hard to think. So again, it would probably actually be books, in that for $50, I love using my Kindle. And so for $50, I could get myself 5 books. And so that would be pretty good value. I love reading climbing books, in particular, ones about various alpinists, in the Himalayas and that. And so for $50, I would probably go get myself like 5 Kindle books.
Favorite album or music download of all time?
Oh, so I am terrible when it comes to music. That I don't get albums that no artists or anything. I will always use like Pandora and stuff so that I can just have like I know a couple of artists in that, and it will then just pick other artists and be like, yeah, this is all good. Because I don't buy a lot of, I've never listened to a lot of music.
What about doco? Favorite doco or movie? Do you have one that stands out?
Favorite doco or movie? Favorite movie is probably V for Vendetta. I've watched that like quite a few times. I love that. In terms of docos, no, because usually like whatever doco I watch, like every time I watch one, I'm like, oh yes, that was amazing. Now that's my favorite. So I can't really remember any in particular.
If you had to give up one thing for the rest of your life, either coffee or chocolate, what would it be?
I guess chocolate. I've always been into the really dark chocolate, like 99% stuff, love it, or just like straight cacao powder in like smoothies and stuff like that. But I feel like, yeah, I feel like I could live without that. Whereas coffee, like that's the first thing I have in the morning. I wake up like in coffee. And so if I wake up, you asked me before, like, oh, it's a hot day or if it's a tough day in that, what gets you out at coffee gets me out of bed. So I feel like I'd have to give up chocolate.
And in regards to the future, do you have anything planned running wise that you're working towards for either this year or maybe a medium term goal?
So obviously my major goal for this year is the Skyrunning World Championships over at Buff Epic Trail in Spain. So that's in the Pyrenees. That'll be 105k with 8,000 meters of vert. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's at the end of July. Sort of medium term, I'd like to run my first 100-miler either end of next year or maybe the year after. If that's if things are going well. Like always, this is always assuming no major injuries or anything like that. But yeah, and then UTMB has kind of been just this long-term major goal. That was one of the races that really got me into ultra running, that you sort of hear about that and you go, oh yeah, I want to do that one day.
And where can people find out more about you online? Do you have I've mentioned your website, benduffus.com, DUFFUS.com. Are you on Facebook, or where else can people reach out to you and follow your adventures?
Yep, so those are the main two. Obviously my blog, benduffus.com, and also find me on Facebook. I've got an athlete page that people can go like. And yeah, that would be the main two ways that people can find me.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the show notes so listeners can reach out to you that way. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Good luck with the rest of this year and for your future races. And I'll definitely be keeping an eye out for you and following your progress. You definitely walk the walk and you were born to kick ass.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
If you've made it this far in the Born to Kick Arse podcast, then you've done well. I want to continue introducing you to the most fascinating people on the planet so you can get an inside look at their approach, mindset, and secrets to success. Hopefully, these interviews will inspire you to take steps towards reaching your own goals, no matter how big or small. One common theme all these people have is that they are proactive, and I need you to be proactive right now by subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast on iTunes. I also need you to head over to borntokickarse.com and subscribe to my newsletter. Please also tell one close friend about this podcast, someone like you who also kicks ass and wants to realize their full human potential. Welcome aboard and catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. What's stopping you from kicking ass?